Hello, everybody. We'll get started in one more minute.
You can sit a little bit so you can see the screen.
All right. I think we should get started. So, my name is Vishy Swaminathan. I'm one of the program co-chairs. Welcome to day 2. It is my honor to introduce our distinguished keynote speaker, Professor Ramesh Jain, a Donald Brand Professor in Information and Computer Science in University of California at Irvine. A fellow of IEEE, ACM, AAI, AAAS, and SPIE, who has done some phenomenal groundbreaking work in research. In his research areas are cybernetics, computer vision, AI, and multimedia computing. I can spend the entire hour singing Ramesh's praises, but he's not just an eminent researcher, but also what is quintessential of a serial entrepreneur who has co-founded several companies. But then again, if you have been in the multimedia space, you already know Ramesh. Ramesh has moved on to what I call research that matters. And I've heard several talks from Ramesh on various different things beyond what researchers normally work on, and how impactful that research has been. Today, he's going to talk about multimodal augmented homeostasis, and that definitely falls into that bucket. Let's welcome Ramesh.
Thank you very much for your introduction. I feel very flattered and honored, but at least in one aspect, you are 100% right. The talk that I'm going to give today is slightly different than many other talks that I have given. In the following that I started thinking about this topic when you folks approached me to give a talk. And I started thinking that I have been doing several things. How can I pull them together into something that's going to be interesting and that will be very, very relevant to future of multimedia? And that's when I started putting together these. So what you are going to be exposed to in the next 45 to 50 minutes is really very early thoughts, uh, and I welcome you to challenge me, ask me questions on any of the topics when we have time, and I will try to leave enough time for our discussions. So, with that, I'm going to talk about multimodal augmented homeostasis. If you are thinking what it is, we'll start discussing that. What it is we are going to discuss each and every term here, multimodal augmented homeostasis, and then we will consider that this is really a grand challenge for multimodal computing. I will discuss about some work that we have started doing in this area and we will be doing in this area. We'll discuss what are the progress that has been made and what are the challenges in this area. So I will be using work from many of my colleagues, not only from UCI, but from many other places also. I could list a lot of papers here, but I thought that I will just give you the key papers, and I will include this in the slide deck so that after my talk, if somebody wants it, they can go and visit these papers. So let's start with some terms that I use. Augment. What does augment mean? Augment is commonly used to make something bigger, more intense, better by using some other technology, some other techniques. Until very recently, augment was a very general term. Now it is used in lot more elect. That means we all have started hearing a lot about augmented reality. Most of the people who are in the attendance today, they are all related to computers, information, multimedia, and so on. And we all are playing a very important role in augmented reality. As the first picture shows, you could be looking at a picture. You may not even take the picture, but just because you start hovering over the picture, the system recognizes objects in this and provides you relevant information that you may need. That's good use of augmented reality. You can do this in any city, you can do it to your food, you can do it to any object. The second picture that I saw you here is augmented reality being used in surgery. This is not a science fiction, this is what is really happening. Uh, we will, when they are doing surgery, they can get more information about the particular patient, or they can get more information about a particular disease, particular part, and how to approach it, and so on. This is augmented reality. Multimedia. Who is here who doesn't know multimedia? Almost everybody who is attending this knows multimedia. We all have five senses. So what is the importance of multimedia when we all have all these multi-sensory system? We are all multi-sensory system. The important thing is multimedia or these five senses are essential for understanding the real world. Without these, we cannot understand the real world because none of them, even the most powerful vision or audio, can help you understand the real world. You have to combine complementary information because none of the mode gives you complete information. So you combine all this information and augment one sensor with other sensors. So in a sense, multimedia is nothing but augmentation of one medium with other medium and other knowledge sources. If you do not have other medium and other knowledge sources, you will not be able to do real multimedia. So that's what multimedia is about. Multimedia used to be mostly audio visual. Even now, most people work on audio visual. Slightly, they started thinking about the other three senses. But before those other three senses can become dominant, the world has started changing so that we are now starting to utilize other modes. That's why multimedia is becoming now multimodal. We started using GPS, we start using heart rate, we use temperature, we use accelerometer, and you will see many other sensors in this talk. So you start doing all these things there. A very interesting thing is this conference is all about big MM. That's very interesting term. IBM, something like 8 years ago, started putting together or started popularizing this particular diagram. They said that big data is all about four V's: volume, variety, velocity, and veracity. Why do you need all these things? What does these things really mean to you? Volume is clear. That's why it was called multimedia. Variety, because this started becoming big data when we started dealing with real world. When we were dealing only with payroll systems and business systems, it was not really multimodal systems. But as we started dealing with real systems, we started collecting data using other media, and that started making it multimodal or multimedia. The next thing that came in, because we are dealing with real world, we have to deal with time. We can't avoid time. And when we start dealing with time, we are dealing not with data, but with data streams. That is what velocity is all about. We are trying to solve real time problems. And that is a very important aspect. Multimodality and real time are very important. Second aspect is veracity or credibility. And this thing is, whenever you are trying to apply the technique that we all use, we associate our confidence or amount of certainty with credibility. So this is what the multimedia data is. What are the dominant applications of multimedia? We started with image search, went to video on demand, video conferencing. Just imagine if multimedia was not here and COVID had started, this conference will be cancelled. So will every other conference. We can have this because of multimedia. We started shopping, we started doing social media, good or bad. But all these applications have been dominant and they have been applied. Which one do you like? Which one do you think is the future? When you start thinking about the future application is yet to come, can you guess what that application is going to be? That application is the most important application of computing that is going to be related to health. Because we all know health is the greatest wealth. We also know no health, no life. No life, no multimedia. So when we start thinking about all these things, we start thinking that this must be a very important thing. But when you start looking at the world, you find that healthcare is broken in every country. I will not give you history of every country, but I can only tell you that I live in US, where when you talk about healthcare, you are neither talking about health nor you are talking about care. Healthcare is all about insurance companies and healthcare providers. It's all business. If you are talking about my native country, India, it is again all about business, and it is all about Bhagwan Bharose. You depend for everything and you are surprised and how life works. And that's why many times you hear that इसको तो दवा की नहीं दुआ की जरूरत है. That means it doesn't need medicine, but it needs God's grace. This is how the state of healthcare is. Can multimedia community help? What can we do about this? My answer is obviously yes. That's why I'm talking here with you. And that brings me to the last term, homeostasis. Homeostasis, and you are going to hear a lot about this, but I will convert it to an engineering problem very soon. But homeostasis is how our body functions. It is how this is the process that keeps us in a stable state. All the physical, chemical, even the electrical impulse system that are working in the living systems are actually under homeostasis. Our temperature is maintained using this, our glucose levels, pH, oxygen level, and everything that maintains the constancy of internal environment is because of homeostasis. Most important thing, it works every moment of our life. When it starts not working properly, that's what we are going to see what we start doing. And when it stops, we stop. So homeostasis is going to play a very important role. But to understand the role of homeostasis and what it can do, let's look at the most turning point in health. That came in the last century, between 1900 to 2000. And what you find is very interesting. Incidentally, exactly 102 years ago, we had another episode going on there, influenza epidemic in 1980. Now we have COVID. Yeah. But what you notice in this diagram is that between 1900 to 2000, we gained about 35 years in our life expectancy. That's amazing. 35 years in one century. But you also notice that after the middle of the century, from around 1950, it had started flattening. Not the flattening that you hear in COVID, but flattening of our life expectancy started around that time. And that was because we learned how to deal with infectious diseases. And that made chronic conditions a lot more important. That process continues. As you can see here in this diagram, in this 57% were non-communicable diseases in 1990 and 33% were communicable diseases. By 2016, 72% are non-communicable diseases. Communicable diseases are 19%. What you see is that non-communicable diseases or chronic diseases are becoming prominent. What you find out is that today, 7 out of 10 deaths and 86% of the cost are related to chronic diseases. Heart disease, cancer, diabetes, uh, dementia, uh, lung diseases, arthritis, and all this kind of thing. So, what do we do with this information? The first thing we start thinking is, why are chronic diseases becoming so common? We are making big victories over infectious diseases, but why not on chronic? The problem is, chronic diseases are because of the wear and tear on our body. With aging, different parts stop working as nicely as they used to work. And this results in dysfunction in homeostasis. And dysfunction in homeostasis results in the onset of chronic diseases. Usually, by the time you detect this, it is too late. For example, in this diagram, you see glucose level starts increasing. It remains all right, but then slowly it starts increasing. Now, there are standards to call that when the glucose level goes this way, this much, then only you have a disease or then only you have a problem. But by the time you come there, it's too late. See here, by the time you come here, insulin resistance has already started becoming flattening. So the thing is that how do we deal with this kind of thing? In the last 5 to 6 years, something called P4 medicine or P4 health has become very popular. We will say that in place of reactive mechanisms, we must use predictive, preventive, personalized, and participatory approaches. This is the new paradigm in healthcare, and we will see that in many different ways we use this paradigm quite a lot. So let's start looking at our health and what factors govern this. Something very interesting. What you find out is that only 10% of our health depends on health care or access to care. About 20% depends on genetics, about 20% on environment, and 50% on healthy behavior. That means more than 70%, because in genetics, epigenetics also depends on your behavior and environment. But let's go with 70-30. So 70% of our health is in our hand. But that's one very important factor to remember. But the more important factor to remember is, given this makeup, how do we spend our resources and what do we do? This is what we do. You see this? This is mind boggling. What you see is that we spend 88% of our resources on what affects our health, only 10%. And we spend 4% of our resources on what is our 50%. This is disturbing and this needs serious attention. What we will see today is how do we take care of this and how do we go there. Let's try to understand homeostasis a little bit better. Homeostasis is really nothing but nature's engineering. Nature is the best engineer, and homeostasis is one of the most elegant mechanisms that exist in living organisms. Yeah. As we discussed, this is the system that maintains stability while adjusting to conditions externally. And this is what the important thing is. Suppose that we want to start understand homeostasis. Here is a very simple diagram. What you see is, suppose that you eat something that you love, and that results in your blood sugar level rising. That is detected. Pancreas start releasing insulin, which helps you convert this glucose to glycogen. Excess glucose gets converted to glycogen and gets stored. Let's consider the other situation, because now you are not eating, you are doing some other activities. Suppose that because of those activities or because of some reason, your glucose level starts falling. When glucose level starts falling, once again, alpha cells in pancreas start doing their magic. They release glycogen, and that glycogen starts converting this to glucose, which is needed by your body. This process continues all the time, all 24/7. Now let's consider this in slightly more engineering terms. What you do is you want to maintain in homeostasis. So you want to maintain the situation balanced, as you see on this. If somehow the imbalance comes, this imbalance is detected and the receptors start following this. They send this information to the control signal, control center. Control center decides what action needs to be taken. And that action is conveyed to actuators, or what is commonly called effectors. And they go and take action and bring back to the equilibrium. This is what is continuously happening in our body. In 1942, Norbert Wiener wrote a book called Cybernetics. All the terms that we use, cyberspace, etc., have been derived from this. But Cybernetics was a book that was written about control and communication in the animals and the machine. Norbert Wiener built a group at MIT, and he argued that the control and communication processes are exactly the same in living systems as well as they are in mechanical systems. And he started popularizing the diagrams like this shown here. Interestingly, this diagram is exactly the same as the homeostasis engineering oriented diagram we saw. And what we see in this diagram is The important components are, number one, the sensors. These are the sensors that detect the state of the system. Next, you have a model, that is the controlled plant. In our case, in all our discussion today, we are going to be concerned about a person. So we'll be concerned about model of a person. And finally, there is a controller, logic and inputs, and that controller is sitting here. These three are the important components. Then you have the reference input where you want to be, etc. But this is what the system is. This is how things are going to be working. Mathematically, this can be very easily represented, and that's what it was represented as, that the state of the system, X is the state of the system gets transformed using this particular matrix, plus this is the input and this matrix. So basically, depending on your state at this moment and the new input, you get transformed. The output variable, the behavior that you see, depends also on the same kind of things, X state and the input. The important things are to consider X, U, and Y, because X is the state of the system, U is the input that you apply, and Y is what sensors observe. There are two important terms that we will not go too much into details, but observability. Observability means, can you determine the state using the measurements? That means, can you find out X based on observing Y? Can you find out of how heart is based on my pulse rate, or based on my face, or based on my blood pressure? That's observability. Controllability is, can you take the system to desirable state? How can you control? What kind of input should be applied so that you can go to this? If you know what input needs to be applied to get what output or what state, then you are in good shape. So this is what these things are. Let's look at a very case. Type 1 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is more lifestyle. Type 1 is more biological reasons. In type 1 diabetes, your pancreas don't make enough insulin, or in some cases no insulin. How do you treat this? How will the homeostasis work? There is a serious problem. What happens is that people have to measure their glucose level many times in the day, and they have been instructed that when your glucose level goes to this level, inject insulin. That's what they have to do. Unfortunately, in many cases, there is juvenile diabetes. These are very young kids who get this, and in many cases, that becomes very difficult for parents' life, and their kids' life is almost always in danger. So, how can we do something about this? Cybernetics comes to rescue this. You saw in the previous figure, you were measuring by picking your finger, your glucose level, and then injecting things. Why not design an electronic system? This device is continuously measuring your glucose level, getting the information to the controller. This is a pump. This can inject correct amount of insulin in the body. These systems are not very old. They started appearing in the last decade, but they are increasingly becoming popular, and they have been literally God's gift to mankind, or God's gift to type 1 diabetes patients. Except that they are not God's gift, they are Cybernetics' gift. It has been a lifesaver, not only for patients, but their families. Talking about augmenting homeostasis, that was a good example. Look at this beautiful picture. Why are these birds huddling? Interesting, isn't it? Let's look at another example of homeostasis. How do we maintain our body temperature? How do we maintain is very simple. This is normal body. Body senses that body temperature is falling. It starts constricting blood vessel so that heat can be conserved and your body temperature remains at the steady level. And that's what keeps your body level right. What happens when it's very hot? Body temperature starts rising. That results in dilating your blood vessels and activating your sweat glands. And that starts resulting in evaporations, and that it starts bringing down or cooling your body temperature. But this process is all the time working. What happens if you live in a very cold area where temperature is going to be very low? That means your homeostasis system may have difficulty working. So what do? You say, I have to take care of my body. And if I want to take care of my body, I'm going to augment homeostasis. How do you do this? You wear correct clothing. Then you can do anything. Same thing happens when temperature rises. If the temperature rises and you cannot take care of this, then what do? You again do the same thing. You go to a beach, you go to a pool, you go to some areas. Or if this is not there, then you start doing something else. And that something else is, we will call, the previous thing was we were helping this augmentation. Now we will talk about continuous augmentation. What is continuous augmentation? Simple. We all are nowadays used to it. It's a climate control system. A system, as you see in this diagram, there is a very simple sensor. You are comparing the temperature with this thing, desirable temperature. Depending on whether the temperature is low or high, the controller starts actuating particular thing, and that increases the thing. This system is continuously working. We call it air conditioning system. The thermostat in our house starts controlling everything there. That's the sensor that controls it. These systems are part of every building, they are part of every city. The modern life completely depends on air conditioning system. That means the modern life completely depends on putting an additional layer of homeostasis in our living conditions. This, what you see in this building, is nothing but this is an external layer of homeostasis that we are putting. That's what is going on. So, what is augmented homeostasis? Augmented homeostasis is self-regulating digital processes which human systems can achieve goals to maximize their quality of life. That's what we want to discuss. And when we want to discuss this, as we discussed, there are some very important functions required. Number one is health state estimation, two, guidance, three, actuation. We also have to build the personal model. We require that, and we have to have the goal state. And finally, we want to make it a closed loop perpetual operation. It has to be continuously working. These are the three different components that are essential to make it happen. Let's look at the architecture for augmented homeostasis. This is the architecture that can be built. Goal could be to maintain our normal state or whatever is required for our health thing. There is a controller. We want to define control actions using our lifestyle. Remember, 50% to 70% depends on our lifestyle and environment. And only 10% depends on medical systems. So we still continue with that. We come to the person, there are external factors that are going to change our life. But what we want to do is, we want to consider what kind of sensors we are going to use. Because sensors play, as we saw, the most important role. Because based on sensors, we are going to be able to detect the health state. So what kind of sensors we are going to use? There are continuous observation sensors, as we will see, and they are episodic observations. We'll discuss this in a minute, but that's what these things are. Personicle is personal chronicle. We'll discuss this again more in detail. All this information goes to the cloud, and based on this information, we use event mining to build the person model. Remember, person model was very important. Controller could use person model to decide what the actions to take. So this is now architecture for augmented homeostasis. Let's go back to the traditional health system for a second. Traditional health system is still very old-fashioned system. When you go to a doctor, it is really, you are relying on last century or even year before last century technology. What used to happen there is the following thing. Okay? What you did was, what's going on here? Why is it not advancing? Okay, this is what happens. Let's go back one step. When you start feeling sick, you go to a doctor. Doctor measures, asks first, looks at you, uses a stethoscope and everything. Incidentally, stethoscope is the only device this society knows that has not changed at all in last 250 years. But you use other measurements. Based on this, your doctor starts thinking what is going on. What he's trying to do is he's trying to estimate your health state. But unfortunately, in place of estimating your health state, he is estimating your disease state. So if you go to a diabetes expert with the same condition, he may diagnose one thing. Then if you go to mental uh, disease experts or cardiac disease experts. But anyway, they estimate your health condition. Based on that, they decide what you should be doing. They write the prescription, you get the prescription. More than 50% people never use their prescription because they either don't understand or they don't understand the value of this or they don't know how to use it. System is open loop. You saw homeostasis was completely closed loop system. So you start thinking there has to be a better way to deal with this kind of system. And one of the things that you start thinking is, how can I really get more attention so that this thing can become closed loop system? Closed loop system means this whole process continuously going on. How can this process go on continuously? In the modern healthcare, does that happen anytime? We'll come back to this in a second. For the time being, let's look at completely different example. When you wanted to go to a place, what did you do 30 years ago? You looked at maps and analyzed the maps, prepare triptychs and things like that. You carried your maps anywhere you were going, and you are looking more at the maps than on anything else. Something happened, very powerful, about 20 years ago, because computers came. Now, because you had computers and all the knowledge about all the places was put in this thing, you could only specify what is your destination and what is your starting point. Once you specified this, you got turn by turn direction that you put in your car or you carried and you tried to go there. Many times you still got lost because you were not paying enough attention. If you are driving with your spouse will tell you how many times you make these mistakes and tell you that you don't pay attention to driving. But things changed again. And this time something really very interesting happened. Now we still had the same kind of system here that you are seeing. But in place of that directions, now you have already the system here. And The biggest miracle was you introduced a cybernetic loop. You introduced closed loop system. You introduced a mechanism to determine your current state because GPS became popular. GPS became available. Remember, GPS is nothing but tells the system what is your state. And based on this, now you don't even try to think about this. You just say, oh, I have to go here. You punch in the destination. You may not know where you are, but it doesn't matter. You know where you want to go, and you just go there. This is nothing very powerful, magic, miracle. And this happened because knowing current state is magical. We saw in homeostasis, we saw in cybernetic system that the reason system works is because you know what is your current state. So, can we introduce this in our healthcare system? We saw the system that was open loop. Can we introduce perpetual health guidance so that this becomes a closed loop system? Interestingly enough, in healthcare, there is a very interesting example. So let me ask you a question. When do people get best healthcare? Too bad that we are not meeting in face to face. Otherwise, I could have asked you this question. But today I will not spend time waiting for your answer. But just think about this. When do you get best healthcare? Answer will surprise you. You get your best healthcare when you are about to die and in intensive care unit. As you see in this picture, there are lots and lots of sensors as you see all over. The nurse is there, the doctor is there. They are continuously monitoring you, what actions they should take. They have now introduced a perpetual system based on cybernetics. So my question to you is, can we put everybody in an ICU from the day they are born to the day they die? How will that be to live in ICU? And you think I'm going crazy? No, it is possible. And in fact, that is happening because that's what is happening now. And based on this, based on the devices that you wear in your hands, based on your smartphone, based on other sensors that are going in your body, you can now start building like a navigation system on your Google Maps or on your maps. Now you can start building a personal health navigator. This personal health navigator will guide you to better health. And we will see what do we mean by better health in a second. But more importantly, this will use all the real-time information to redirect you around the disease. It will not use the textbook information. It will use the real-time information based on your condition and based on the latest medical knowledge. And finally, this system can guide you to your optimal health state independent of your socioeconomic status. You may be very poor or you may be the richest person. It will treat you equally. The question is, can we build this system? And that's what we are trying to do. This is what we are trying to do is personal health navigator. Let's see what it does. We talked about making sensors and doing all the measurements. All the data streams are coming here. These data streams are being processed and what kind of events are going on, they are being detected. They will be fed to health state estimation system, but they are also being collected into personal chronicle. And this personal chronicle combines with omics data, your genomics, proteomics, and all other omics systems. This uses the exposome material, and based on all these things, it builds the personal model. We'll see a little bit of this in few minutes. And then this uses all kind of knowledge sources, medical services, regulation, demographics, environment, and all these things. Based on your health state that is determined by the system and all these knowledge sources, the system decides what correct action should be done. And that information is communicated to you through your phone, through your other devices. And if you don't listen to the system, it can start calling your spouse or your mom or your friend and all these people. All this information is also going to your healthcare providers. All the doctors are getting this, all the nurses are getting it. They are continuously monitoring this, and then they can also participate in influencing an adherence system. So you see, we have health state estimation, we have personal model building, we have this guidance system, and then we have this information communicated to how to guide the things. And this is again 24/7. The only thing, only device that allows you to remain always in touch with yourself is your phone. Your phone knows more about you than anybody else, and you cannot part with your phone. So that device is continuously with you. That means you are continuously affected. Let's consider a very of diabetes in this particular case. In diabetes, the same architecture, what you want to do, you want to understand how active is the person, what kind of food the person is eating, whether the person is getting correct medication or not, and what is the glucose level of the person. All of these things can be measured now. Activity, food, medication, this has to be inserted by the person, but glucose level can be continuously monitored. Based on this, you can monitor this through building the personal model of the person. You can have sensitivity to different foods and to different medication. You can determine what is happening to glucose level, and based on this, you can determine whether the person should use activity or food or medication. And this information is communicated to the person, and this is forming the continuous loop. A friend of mine, Dr. Ping Wang, who is a diabetes expert, and I started working towards building a personal diabetes navigator. A very good team in Irvine has started building this system, and this system is now you can use your iPhone to download Diabetes as an application. Unfortunately, at this moment, it is only available in United States, but as it starts maturing, we'll allow it to be used in any part of the world. And right now, it is available only on iPhone. Soon, it will be available on Android also. But this system is the concrete example of what is happening. In our lab at UCI, we are also building systems that are going towards mental health related or using the same kind of philosophy. Let's start discussing how these things are implemented, what is really going on behind the scene. There are sensors to estimate health state. There are two major classes of sensors. There are some low-cost sensors that are continuously working, some high-cost sensors. They are used mostly in diagnostics. Right now, unfortunately, these are the low-cost sensors that can be used all the time. They are high-cost sensors that are used only in diagnostics and these things. And unfortunately, what happens is that these two types of sensors are used currently into two different applications. One is considered wellness, another is considered diagnostic or disease monitoring. But the person is the same. Can we combine these two to build something that we can call health state space? And this health state space will be same kind of thing as we saw in the navigation. This is the personal health state space, and there are many layers now. I'm going to give you a two-dimensional example to make things easy to understand, and we start putting together these things. So there are different knowledge layers. This is how this health state looks. Depending on all the biomarkers, all the sensors, and all measurements, my system can determine that this is where my health state is currently. My system also knows that really, when you start seeing this, these are the different areas in my health state for these things. So if I'm here and I just want to be a good hiker, it's easy. If I want to be Olympic athlete, it may require more effort. And if I want to just avoid high blood pressure, that may be entirely different approach. Effectively, we start measuring health state and consider that disease is just a subset of it. So what do? We start considering this health state and then consider the personal model. How is the personal model? We start considering all this information coming from your lifestyle and everything, coming from exposure and coming from omics. And we start, based on this, determining what is going to be propensity to diseases, the rule-based health behavior, and your behavior for from your health profile and what kind of things you do. This could be for whole life, it could be for recent past, or for particular health condition. This is how you start building personal chronicle. It uses now all these sources of information, your daily activity level, what time you are doing what, where were you from GPS, what kind of applications you are using, what ambient sound is there, and based on that, it can automatically determine what kind of event you are performing. On this, you can lay down your heart rate, your all kind of other sensors. So that means you are collecting now all the information and putting this in one chronicle. That's what we call personicle, personal chronicle. In this, you are using both these sources of information, continuous and episodic. You combine all these things, okay, and start building what is going on happening with you by combining all this information. And this is working continuously 24/7. And if you require some input to this system, you can do that or can get from doctors. ClearSense company from Florida, having their development team in India, has been helping us build this open source Personicle. This is available on Android. You can download it today and you can start using this. It will tell you how much time you are spending in what. I will not go in the details of this. The next thing that you do is, as I mentioned, event mining. Causality is the most important thing. In order to understand any disease, why did you get that disease? What can cause you a particular disease? What could be the factors? You have to understand what kind of events are going on. We capture the events in Personicle. Can we start using those events now through event mining system? Event mining has two components: hypothesis formation at the top level and hypothesis verification. So you suspect something and then you can verify using some other thing. This is one of the most powerful emerging area nowadays because everything is becoming data stream. Some people in our lab did some work earlier. Lale Dalali worked on this, and now Vaibhav Pandey is trying to put together a system to implement this thing. And this starts taking us to start thinking what are the input to the system. Food and exercise, sleep, stress and environment, and medicine. These are the inputs. How do we decide what to do? Let me give you an example of food. Food is the most important thing. We enjoy food. So food is for enjoyment, and food is also for our health. And food can be obtained in many different ways. I'm not going to go in details about this thing. There is a paper at ACM Multimedia that talks about all this kind of things in details. But the important thing that you want to see is food is responsible for your health as well as for your enjoyment. Okay. And there comes a very big problem. What I like to eat is not what my body likes. That's why I always face this problem. You show me good food, and tell not to eat. And you show me food that I don't like, but you tell me that if I want to be healthy, I should be eating. Can there be a better way of this? Can we have a food recommendation system that works better than that? In this system, you have to know characteristics of each food item. You have to know the personal model of the person. What does person like to eat and what does the person's body likes to eat? And what is going on outside in the world? That is the context. And based on that, you build a food recommendation system. So what you start doing is you start creating a log, a food log. This is an area where computer multimedia community has been doing a lot of work. There are a lot of people who are dealing with the images of food, recognizing this. Kyo Aizawa from Japan has been building food log for last 10 years. Yeah. So in food log, you try to find out what food item, what nutrition level they are eating, where they are eating, when did they eat, what kind of environment was there, and other information. As I mentioned in multimedia, people have been looking at computer vision, but we are multimedia people. Let's build a food logger that combines any medium, that may use camera, that may use speech, barcode, payment systems, and text and everything. It can also get input from your location and all this kind of thing. And based on this, it starts building this food log. And once we have a food log, then we can start developing a very powerful event mining system. This looks a little complex, and that's why I will not go through details of this because we are already almost at the end of the time. So this is the event mining system that takes it. So in this particular case, there are two problems. How to build food chronicle for a person and how to create a world food atlas that will help us. Both of these are complex problems and they will take long time for us to work. Long time in internet days is few years. If we start working now, in 2-3 years, we will have much better systems that will start telling us what to eat and what to do. Giving you a concrete example. Suppose that this is not happening to me, but I will use myself as an example. Suppose that I'm having difficulty sleeping on several nights. I start thinking, what could be the reason? I look at my Personicle, I look at my food stream, and I look at my sleep stream. My event mining system goes through this analysis, and based on the event mining, my system comes up with a very interesting observation. It says, spicy food and 2 glasses of wine can result in acidity, and that can result in sleepless nights. So, how can I make this actionable? That my system will warn me whenever I'm at a Sichuan restaurant or an Andhra restaurant. It will tell me, don't eat much spicy food or don't drink wine. This is what can start happening. So, what we need to do is, what is going on here? Okay, okay. The homeostasis, as we discussed, is essential for our life. Sensing is basically multimodal. We are going to use multimodal senses. Multimedia community is expert in information extraction from multimodal data streams. Let's start using those things. Augmented homeostasis should be considered a new grand challenge for our community, the multimedia community. And finally, I want to share with you my dream. I want to empower personal health by building systems that will rely on wearables, smartphones, and all this kind of thing, so that even the person living in the remotest part of the world and poor people, nowadays 85% people own phones. Soon wearable devices will also be very inexpensive. So everybody will be able to afford this, and this will be our doctor in our pocket. Thank you very much. This is what we want to do. I want you to help me let's start this project now. Thank you very much. And if we have time for questions, I would be happy to answer the question.
Thanks for that wonderful talk, Ramesh. Although we're at the top of the hour, I know that we have 30 minutes allocated for coffee break in the program. So although we don't want to use all of it, we can at least go for another 10 minutes or so, or even more with questions. Please unmute yourself and ask questions if you have that capability, or post your questions in the Q&A.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, this is EU. Thanks for your nice talk. I'm wondering what kind of model more suitable for process and fusion multimodal data in personal health navigation system.
Can you repeat your question, because you were breaking down, so I did not get it exactly. I got that you want to ask something about multimodal data for personal model. Yeah, can you repeat your question?
Okay, please? So I'm wondering what kind of model more suitable for processing and the fusion multimodal data when we build the personal health navigation system.
Very good question. The models will be of different types. Let me consider and explain to you in a very simple example, the food model. For food model, for example, as I mentioned, there are two things. Number one is what you like to eat, and number two is what happens to your body when you eat particular food. The first question is, the model will be, you like to eat this kind of food. We will talk about taste space and we will talk about flavor space. You can represent that, okay, I like this kind of food. Looking at you, I can say that, okay, she may like Chinese food. And what kind of food do Chinese people like? Now, if she, I'm sure you are not in India right now, but if she were in Delhi, then what recommendation should I give her to eat? Which particular Indian restaurant will have food that will be close to Chinese food? Okay? Now, this is the model that captures food items and their taste and this kind of things. And that captures what kind of things you like, personal preferences. But when you try to capture health model, it will try to capture whether you are allergic to something, whether if you eat this thing and your glucose level rises very high, or whether this will be bad for this particular health condition. So this will become the rule-based model. So the first model will be like color space. You can define flavor space and taste space, and you can identify that in this taste space, these are the areas that will be useful. We all understand color space. We all understand what color people like. So that will be that kind of model. But on the other hand, for health, it will be the rule-based model. Same kind of things we'll have to do for other conditions. So it's a very interesting and very challenging problem.
Okay, thank you. Another question is about so as we know, the people dislike to disclose the personal data. So when you collect the personal data to build some healthcare system, do you think about the privacy issues?
Well, whether we like to think or not, if we want to make these systems successful, we will have to think about this, because privacy issue is extremely important. And we have started thinking about this. We are using the standard approaches, but those standard approaches may not be good enough, because this is very sensitive data. So what we will have to do is to start considering more sensitive aspects of this. I'm working with multiple people, some of them local, and one person that I'm talking about collaboration is Professor Mohan Kankanhalli, who is part of the organization team, and I see that he is also sitting in the audience. So Mohan is going to solve my problems related to privacy.
Okay, thank you.
We have one raised hand from the attendees. Attendees, please raise your hand if you would like to ask a question. Q Rashid, please go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Ramesh. Very good presentation. I was just thinking about these days all the social robots and all of them, entering the homes and all of those situations, and what could be a role social robots can play in sort of building these personal models, and really, so they are sort of living, especially in aging population situation where that may be their only companion also. So in terms of data collection, all that, how do you see these kind of intersection between the two topics?
In fact, Dr. Rasid, I think this is a very important question, and knowing a little bit about your project, this is very relevant to that thing, because if you have a care companion that's observing the person all the time, in addition to the wearable devices that could be building the model of the person, this robot, this care companion can also be building another model of the person that could be more relevant to behavior of the person, because behavior of the person is very difficult to determine any directly wearable sensors. But that can be observed a lot better by a care companion and things like. So about using wearable devices and diagnostic sensors in the same framework. Now, in this particular case, you have this external sensor also that could be combined with it. And we can build a much better model of the subject and can help them much better.
Okay, thank you.
I'll try to ask maybe a complementary question to what E asked and associated with Dr. Rashid's question. It was definitely an inspiring concept of empowering personal health at a nominal price that can be reached to the remotest part of the world. And positioning that as a grand challenge is great, but one of the problems in the personal health space is in the US there are these HIPAA compliance, and I'm sure every geography and country has similar limitations in access to data. Are you aware of data sets that have started to become available?
In fact, HIPAA compliance is not that bad issue. HIPAA compliance is much easier issue to deal with. But the data set is much more serious problem. And that takes to, you correctly mentioned, misuse complementary issue here. And we need to solve that. But the type of data that we are talking about right now, we'll have to start collecting. Working with wearable companies may be very useful. They are collecting data quite a lot. So people who collect that data could have access to that data, but they cannot have the other conditions. For example, from smartphones and some of the other personal conditions. So we'll have to start collecting the data. That's what we are dreaming about, and that's what many other people are dreaming about. I am working in Norway with the team, and they are collecting data, and they published recently at Multimedia Systems Conference a paper, I think it was called PM Data, where they were collecting data from 24 sports people, and they were analyzing that data. So that data will become publicly available. The data that we will collect will also make it open data, etc. That's why we are making this Personicle, and we will soon release Food Logger also, and we will soon release Event Miner also, and all these things will be open source. So we want to use those. So data is a serious problem, but on the lighter side, when I started doing research in image databases, I could not get even one picture digitized because there were no digitizers. We used to use the cameras. I'm talking about 91. So there were no digital cameras. Uh, we used to use a $20,000 flatbed scanner to scan a catalog so that we could get some pictures and deal with them. But then the memory was problem and all these. So if you are working in multimedia, you are always going to be at the cutting edge of data. You will have to create uh, systems that will collect data and use the data.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. This is Mohan Kankanali from the National University of Singapore. You
ahead, Mohan.
mentioned, you, Ramesh, you have mentioned that you're going to build this, this homeostasis-based architecture, which collects a lot of data, be it continuous data or episodic data. But we know that while the current fashion is data-driven end-to-end machine learning, however, there is already a lot of knowledge in the world, which is codified. And so how do you envisage this external knowledge, which is already well known, uh, also to mix with this data and having data driven system which is informed by external knowledge? And in particular, there is a problem with external knowledge, especially in the medical area. My former president at the university, he was a doctor, and he said there are 1 million medical journal articles published every year, and there is no way of physically ingesting this knowledge into any system. And often this knowledge is contradictory. One study says coffee is good for me, one study says coffee is bad for me. And I think part of the reason is because there is not a very personalized way of doing that study. So how would you address that?
Uh, I have brought that slide that I kind of skipped.
Mm-hmm.
In this slide, what we are trying to show is that what effectively you start doing is you start using external knowledge in the event mining system. And this external knowledge here is coming from different knowledge sources. For example, in the personal food model paper, we analyzed lots and lots of research papers on which particular uh, chemical or nutrition element affects which particular aspects of your health. And those things are captured from there, analyzed and put as the general population-based rules. And those population-based rules then are used to detect or formulate the hypothesis, and then that hypothesis is tested again using these rules and other factors in there. So the machine learning systems will have to learn to work with existing knowledge. And as you know, the initial machine learning systems, we are only looking at data mechanism and trying to apply this. As we are going and we are looking at machine learning systems correctly as a tool to take a particular data set and derive the abstraction of that or derive the classification of that. So we'll have many machine learning systems working under the same framework. That's what the deal is.
Okay, thank you. I have, if you don't mind, I have another question. Vishy, is that okay?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. Let me ask you a somewhat controversial question. You have now advocated a highly data-driven approach to monitor us. You want us to, wear a lot of sensors and continuously continue. Can there be a case of too much data? And let me give you an example, a concrete analogy. In terms of thermodynamics, I mean, you can see a gas and you can basically collect the exact location and velocity of each and every molecule of a gas, and you can have billions of such particles, and I think that is useless. On the other hand, from a thermodynamic macro perspective, you have pressure, you have volume, you have temperature, which effectively summarizes all this data.
Welcome.
And therefore, what would your approach? Can it be a case of collecting too much data?
I have, to be very honest, I have thought a lot about this problem. And I do not, I will, if I said that I know the answer, I will be lying. But on the other hand, my position on that is there will not be a case of too much data. There will be a case of trying to analyze correct mechanism to extract information. At one point, there was people who used to who started using information overload, and that's when people started the scientific community, particularly people working on situation awareness, came up with the argument that there can never be information overload. There can only be data overload, and having poor information extraction algorithms. So we will have to start thinking about correct information extraction algorithm. On the positive side of too much data, I very strongly believe, I did not talk about that today, but living labs are extremely important to build this kind of lifestyle oriented things. And when you start building living labs, how do you do causality analysis? If you have seen Julia Pearl's book, the book of why, the argument is that machine learning is the only first stage. The next stage is, in order to understand causality, you have to do the controlled experiment. Now, in the days of lifestyle measurement using this kind of data-driven approaches, what could be equivalent to lab experiments? What could be the case? I think, again, this is a guess. I think what we will do is we will collect data and then go and slice and dice this data for particular conditions that we are looking for, so that we can ignore all the data that doesn't meet our condition and use only the data that will meet our experimental conditions. And my student Vaibhav is likely to do some experiment in this area. So possibly in 6 to 8 months, I will be able to answer your question more concretely.
Okay, thank you, Ramesh.
We have a question from the audience. Gopal, go ahead.
It appears for some
Okay, now I'm unmuted. Hi, Ramesh. Great talk. Thank you. Just a couple of quick questions. One, um, what evidence do we have? This is of how a personal health navigator is actually helping people, and of course, that creates, with that kind of data, it creates a virtuous loop. So I'm trying to see what you have gathered so far in terms of evidence of personal health navigation, the benefits of personal health navigation, and this approach. Yeah?
Very good question. Let me answer this before you go to the second thing. There are two areas in which we will be able to make concrete statement, because it requires building the complete system. I told you that the Navi system, which is a commercial system now, and which is being used. It's a startup company, started about 1.5 years ago, 1 year ago, in fact. And now they have something like 70 people using this system. They are collecting data, analyzing, and soon they will be able to tell exactly which kind of people it can be helped and where it cannot be helped. At academic level, we are trying to run the similar kind of experiments for mental health at UCI. We have a huge mental health group. There are many people involved in that, and we are running some experiments. We have been paying 20 volunteers, students, for last 6 months to collect all the data, and we are interacting with the psychiatrist, and we will be able to know, again, that kind of thing, whether it is useful or not after some time.
Great. Looking forward to that. The other quick question I had is, in this whole theme of homeostasis, where do you see the biggest gap in our sensing ability today? Is there, as you have gone through this, this is the critical sensing capability that we are missing today?
This is a very, very interesting question. I do not know, because I'm not a doctor, but I will repeat what one doctor told me. And this doctor was CEO of San Diego's Scripps Health System, which is the biggest health system there. And in fact, the question that you asked, I asked him very different way. And his answer was, he said, Ramesh, the most important thing is to know the blood glucose level, even for heart patient and for all other things, and to know all the time the effect of what you are doing, what kind of activity you are doing, etc., on your blood glucose level, because that is a very big indicator. And he said that combine that with the fact that all the cardiac problems are detected based on your heart rate and blood pressure. Now, it is a guess that continuous glucose monitoring systems are number one, very expensive, and they are directly trying to measure glucose measurement. He said, if we can find a way to measure or to find a signal that can give us blood glucose level and heart rate, or we can measure using heart rate, we can find a mechanism to estimate blood glucose also. Because whenever glucose level changes in your body, your heart has to perform different level of function. And in fact, one of my students did some early experiment in this area, and he could classify food into multiple classes for each individual based on how fast your heart rate rises and falls when you are eating that food. Yeah. So
Great.
something like that will be a very good, powerful measurement.
Thanks, Ramesh. Thanks, Rishi.
We take one last question. I think Shivam has a question from the audience. Or maybe not.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Hi, this is Vivek Singh. Thank you, Ramesh, for the talk. This is really nice. I think the biggest, the driving home point was the need for closed loop systems. But then again, in health context, there are good reasons not to have those closed loop systems, right? Because it's very easy to pump in the wrong amount of insulin. People have shown in the past. There were machines which were giving, let's say, the wrong dosages for chemo and so on. So that, to me, like the societal and the medical and the ethical issues surrounding it would make it very hard to make it a closed loop system.
Before I answer your question, thanks very much, Vivek, or anybody who is still there. Vivek was the person who started doing event shop, and that is the basis of Exposome that we are going to do. Vivek, if you do not take interest in this, you should start looking at social determinants of health. Event shop is perfect tool for social determinant of health analysis in the context of health. More than asthma and anything else that you did. But in any case, coming back to your answer, the closed loop system, there could be two closed loop systems. One is like you saw in case of type 1 diabetes. Well, if we extend that to type 2, then it is through your lifestyle and actions that are taking place. Yeah. So they are not, they are closed loop system and they are perpetual system, but the frequency is not as high, or the rate is not as high in type 1 case. Now, the second important thing to remember is that the beauty of the closed loop system is that because you are continuously monitoring, if something is going in a wrong direction, then also you will immediately know that this thing is going in the wrong direction. And if your system is connected to doctors and nurses, then they will immediately try to help you there. It's only the gas. We haven't experimented with this, so we don't know this.
Sure. Thank you, Ramesh.
If there's Shivam's question, I'll be posted in the QA pod, which is about explainability. Explainability is key, and you can't have black box systems in healthcare. Comments, Ramesh?
Yes, In fact, one of the reasons that we are so interested in event mining and this kind of thing is because of that thing only. The diagnostic systems, the current diagnostic systems are the black box system. But all the other model systems that we are going to talk about, they are going to be event mining is based on causality. As soon as you have the causality, you have the explainability. So it's going to take a little bit more time. Some of the same thing could be done using black boxes, but then that doesn't allow you to do the reasoning and provide the correct guidance. For diagnosis purposes, black box systems are good, but for guidance purposes, black box systems are not good.
It's
Thank you, Ramesh. One small
I'd like to thank Professor Ramesh Jain again for that wonderful talk. Very inspiring, and also patiently answering all the questions, and for the most engaging session possible. Thank you, Ramesh. If it were real audience, we would all clap, but I'll clap on behalf of all of the 80 folks who are there.
I'm very sorry. I don't know why my camera was not working. I just realized after I finished my talk that my camera was not working. The intention
So I guess
was
you
not.
need to stop sharing the screen. Then probably you.
Oh, is that the case?
I think
because
so.
in Zoom it allows me to do both.
I thought you were worried about your privacy, Ramesh.
But I leave to you. Privacy, you are going to take care of my privacy.
Thanks a lot, Ramesh. Thanks to all of the audience who stayed over and for the engaging session.
So Professor Ramesh, I mean, some student has asked if it is possible to share the slides, though we have done the recording and will be sharing on the probably YouTube.
Yes. So I will send you slides tomorrow.
Wonderful. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. I need to just edit some things and I will send it to you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much.
Bye.